are watching Simon Says on Mtgo Academy featuring Simon Götzen.
Ladies, gentlemen, Simon Götzen is here, bringing you another episode of Simon Says. And today we're going to look at some of the notable cards in M15. And I don't mean the splashy mythics or the constructed cards. I mean the cards that make limited what it is and that redefine the rules of limited magic, as happens with every new set, basically. So, of course, this isn't going to be a list of every single card that I could talk about, but it's some of the cards that I want to just maybe give you a couple of ideas, couple of thoughts, so that you can learn how to evaluate cards, but also how to play with them, how to play against them, most importantly. Because, well, if you don't expect a certain card, it's easy to lose to it. If you are aware of your opponent's options, it becomes a lot easier to, well, at least evaluate if there is a way to play around some of the cards that are going to be on the list. So let's see what I have prepared today. And the very first mechanic that comes to mind is Convoke. And Convoke changes not only the rules of deck construction and mana curve, which we talked about 2 weeks ago, but also what happens in combat in particular. Now, these are all combat tricks, in a sense. Ephemeral Shields and Gather Courage are also pretty good at protecting a creature from removal. And the most important thing is that they are very easy to cast when you're tapped out. So this is relevant when you're being attacked by an opponent that has cast a creature pre-combat, something that should set off your alarm bells pretty much whenever Convoke is in the set. And it's also relevant if you think that your opponent is tapped out and you are, for example, attacking into a tapped out opponent. Now, the key thing to keep in mind here is that in any given limited format, you really want to prevent any kind of 2-for-1 situations. And that means that, for example, attacking into a person that could be holding Gather Courage and you needing a trick to attack into a blocker is very dangerous, because Gather Courage might get you 2-for-1. And when I play in real life, online, streaming, it doesn't really matter, I often get this question: why didn't you attack there? Why are you so conservative? Why are you so patient? And it's exactly reasons like this. In limited magic, there aren't a lot of things that are worse than getting 2-for-1. So whenever I feel that the game is under sufficient control or progressing slowly enough that I can afford to, I will make sure that I play around every card that I can afford to play around. Now, that doesn't mean staying back and being defensive. I think of myself as an aggressive player, but it does mean that you don't take the unnecessary risks. If you have the chance to deal 1 or 2 damage, but you get blown out by a card that your opponent could easily have and wouldn't have cast until now, it's generally better to play around it. All right. The Convoke cards, of course, continue. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Stoke the Flames is actually quite expensive, so oftentimes it won't be castable for free. But Devouring Light is really tricky, because having 3 white creatures is not as difficult, simply because of cards like Triplicate Spirits and Raise the Alarm. And Devouring Light is the #1 way to get 2-for-1 without you realizing it. It's very easy to think, well, my opponent is tapped out. I'm just going to cast this pump spell. I'm just going to cast... I'm just going to make this double block, whatever. And then Devouring Light just comes down. And sometimes it's possible to spot it. Sometimes it's really brutal and almost impossible to see. If you can afford to play around it, sometimes Devouring Light is just too good to allow that. Some of the more surprising cards are cards that create frogs. Both of them do, in fact. Turn to Frog, basically the small version of Polymorphous Jest. Now, this isn't generally a card that you can play around, but it's good to have on your radar, if only for the fact that oftentimes you are left wondering, well, there isn't anything that can go wrong, right? I'm pretty much safe here. There isn't a spell in the format that will deal with my XX creature, whatever it is. And as it turns out, Turn to Frog, and of course Polymorphist's Jest, does in fact deal with almost any creature in the format. And that's quite important to remember. So if you ever catch yourself thinking, what could my blue opponent potentially have here, then Turn to Frog is most often one of the answers. Also note that it's a card that requires a little bit of setup. You need a blocker, and it's often correct to double block a creature that you've turned to Frog, just so that your opponent can't play a removal spell on your blocker and pretty much negate the Turn to Frog as a result. Raise the alarm, raise the alarm, raise the alarm. Why is this here 3 times, you're probably asking yourself? Well, I think there's 3 reasons why Raise the Alarm should be on your radar and why it's a very notable card in M15 Limited. First of all, there's a lot of X1 creatures, so having 2 instant 1/1s can just generate raw card advantage and can be absolutely huge, even on turn 2 or turn 3, picking off utility creatures, Oresco Swiftclaws, and so on. Torch Fiends, what you name it, basically. Now, this is the very obvious reason why Raise the Alarm is a good card. Now, once we've made sure that we aren't attacking into Raise the Alarm tokens, Raise the Alarm also has some other uses, and one of these uses is that your opponent will cast it at end of turn and suddenly be able to convoke into a much larger spell than you previously imagined. This goes into the same direction, but it's also possible to fuel up a lethal Sanctified charge with Raise the Alarm, which you previously didn't think possible. Loyal Cathar, in a sense, works similarly. And last but not least, and I think this is my favorite interaction, Raise the Alarm is in fact a pump spell if you have a Seraph of the Masses in play. So if you think, well, there's no way my opponent is going to have a combo trick here, a pump spell, Raise the Alarm is in fact a pump spell for Seraph of the Masses. A deceptively powerful card in M15 Limited here, Raise the Alarm. One of my favorites, definitely. Alright, the blue trickiness continues. Into the Void and Ether Spots are pretty brutal cards, not as subtle as Turn to Frog. Now, Into the Void is a card that basically forces you to be quite aggressive against blue opponents. You usually can't afford to just decide, well, I'm going to wait on this creature for a turn, because the more conservatively you play, the more dangerous an Into the Void becomes. And it's quite potent, even so. Now, I think the best decks in the format are really cheap, have a lot of cheap creatures, so Into the Void is not as brutal as in other formats, but still, there's some decks that get absolutely crushed by it, and even in cheap decks, Into the Void is a pretty big tempo swing. Now, Into the Void is a card that you have to think about before you see it, and Ether Spouts is a card that you have to think about once your opponent leaves open 5 mana. Now, in the late game, you won't be able to pick up that tell, but you might just have the luxury to play around it anyway. However, on turn 5 or 6, if your opponent plays his 5th land and then doesn't cast anything, then you should be really, really careful. This is like Divine Verdict, but on all your creatures. You don't want to get hit by Ether Spouts on multiple creatures, if you can at all avoid it. So it's a potent card, I think that much is certain. But at least your opponent is forced to reveal his intentions in a sense. Alright, what are Quickling and Shrapnel Blast doing here? Well, we're looking at a core set, and the core set is more basic by definition and also from a design perspective. Now, that doesn't mean that crazy stuff can't happen, and we already saw Turn to Frog and Polymorphist's Jest. Quickly and Shrapnel Blast are on my list because they defy the general laws of Magic. You don't usually get 5 damage for 2 mana. You don't usually get a flash creature. Well, first of all, a flash creature, but also an instant way to protect your own creatures. Maybe reuse your creatures. So both of these are cards that can catch you completely unaware, because thinking about flash creatures or a super high damage output for low mana cost is usually not on your radar. You're thinking about 2/2 creatures, of course. You're thinking about Ephemeral Shield to protect creatures. You're thinking about Lava Axis maybe. But aren't thinking about the whole package. And this format does have these packages, even if everything is working on a more basic level and the commons are a bit less powerful because of the lack of synergy between cards or mechanics in this core set format. Interesting. Enchantments and auras. Now, why should these be on my radar? Well, as it turns out, it's not only instance that you have to think about. I know that whenever there's a new set coming out, everybody's like, well, these are the removal spells, these are the instant combat tricks, maybe, talk about some of the bombs and so on. But why do I have to be aware of a card like Military Intelligence or Stab Wound? Well, Military Intelligence, even if your opponent hasn't played it yet, might influence your decision making. So the best example would be that you know that this card is in your opponent's deck. You know it from having watched him in a previous round. You know it on Magic Online, maybe because you've passed it. On the new client, you can actually see who you're passing to. Or you might just have seen it, and that's the most likely scenario, in a previous game. So let's say you're playing against a person that starts off with whatever creatures, it doesn't really matter. Now, your attacking and blocking decisions should be influenced by the knowledge of your opponent having military intelligence or not. If you know that attacking puts on pressure and forces your opponent to trade off creatures, then you can weaken the military intelligence that might be in your opponent's hand or deck. Or that might be in your opponent's hand, but is definitely either in his hand or his or her deck. So, on the other hand, what you don't want to have happen is to expose yourself to an attack by your opponent that doesn't punish him for it, that doesn't have him lose creatures, for example. Now, if you're facing evasive creatures that you can't block, you can't do much. But if you're facing a couple of ground creatures, maybe it's actually better to stay back, to not allow your opponent the divination attack, if you want. Now, Stab Wound goes in the same direction. If I know that my opponent has a Stab Wound, I'm actually more likely to play subpar cards to prevent a few of the Stab Wound damage, a little bit of the Stab Wound damage that would have otherwise been dealt to me. So the easiest example is that I would lead with a 2/2 creature on turn 3 rather than a 2/3 creature on turn 3. Because if my 2/3 gets Stab Wounded, it's basically shut off anyway. And depending on what the matchup is, my opponent will just watch me die to Stab Wound or maybe play an evasive creature in addition to Stab Wound. So just something to think about. I'm not saying that once you've seen a Stab Wound, you have to change your play completely. But in those close decisions, having Stab Wound on your radar might make the difference. Alright, we've talked about a lot of powerful cards here, but what I find fascinating about Core Set Limited is that you really need to be aware of the fringe cards, of the underutilized cards, of the 23rd cards, of the sideboard cards even. And Naturalize at Mind, what are these kind of cards? Where I would urge you to try to main deck them, to sideboard with them, to just experiment with them in certain matchups. And in my experience, in my limited experience, if these cards are put to the right use or applied to the right matchups, they can actually be one of the best cards in your deck, or maybe even the card you want to draw most because they are the out that you need to beat your opponent's deck. So don't ever underestimate these kind of cards, but also respect them, respect the fact that your opponent might have them, and maybe formulate a plan around that. It's not always easy. It's not even always possible, but it's still better to think of a plan against a certain card and then realize that you just don't have one than to not think about a card at all. Fester Gloom. Fester Gloom, Fester Gloom. To me, this is mostly a sideboard card, but the more I play this format, the more control-ish my black decks become, and the amount of X1 creatures is just phenomenally high. So Fester Gloom, I wouldn't be surprised to see it out of the main deck. You always have to expect it out of the sideboard of black decks if your deck is susceptible to the effect. And this is relevant as soon as turn 3, because it could change which kind of 3-drop you want to play, for example. It's super relevant for white decks if you have a chance to play around Fester Gloom, do so. It's not always possible, but sometimes it's just best to basically put on as much pressure as possible. But playing around Fester Gloom is something that I would definitely advise. Now, we usually think of Fester Gloom as like the main phase card, which it clearly is as a sorcery. It's also a post-combat main phase card. If your opponent makes a weird attack that wouldn't do anything, or that loses your opponent creatures rather than you, it might be that he or she's setting up a post-combat Fester Gloom, which is just something to have on the back of your mind. If you're being attacked by a bunch of 2/3s, and you block with your own 2/3s, but your opponents are actually black, then you might be setting up for a very bad Fester Gloom post-combat. Okay, this goes into the same direction as the auras and enchantments. Why are creatures cards that should be on my radar? Well, there is a bunch of unblockability in the format. Most of it is flying, and some of it is intimidation. And a Curse Spirit and Elfin Path Mage are just 2 4-drops that don't have the best stats by themselves. But whenever you're playing against the respective colors, you can never be certain that you'll win a late game for sure, because of the evasive potential these decks have. And that basically equates to being aware of these cards in the format. Elfin Path Mage, a bit more clunky, but also more powerful than a Curse Spirit in the abstract. A Curse Spirit, just basically the card, if you're facing a deck that a good matchup, but your opponent goes turn 3 Stab Wound, turn 4 a Curse Spirit, and you haven't prepared for that, you haven't maybe boarded in that Bronze Sable, you might just be drawing dead at that point. And this is the situations that you really want to be avoiding. Sanctified Charge. I don't know if I really need to talk about this. The biggest tell is if your opponent just, especially your white opponents, drop their 5th land and just attack with everything when it looks like this is just a completely unreasonable attack. That's going to be a Sanctified Charge. Now, later on in the game, it's a bit tougher to spot, but against white, it's generally good to be racing and to somehow force the opponent to not keep too many creatures around. Sometimes you also have maybe a 1 double block available, or you can decide to take a bit more damage to survive a Sanctified Charge relatively unimpeded. It's difficult, but it's possible. I think this card is on everyone's radar, so it definitely still makes the list, of course. Alright, last but not least, Cone of Flame and Mass Calcify. Why are a damage spell and a mass removal in the same picture here? Well, as it turns out, Cone of Flame is pretty much a mass removal. In this format, it burns you out as well if necessary, but because creatures are so small, the 1-2-3 punch is actually really brutal. In my experience, whenever I think of Cone of Flame, and I think about it a lot when I play against red, I generally come to the conclusion that I can't beat it without warping my strategy to a point that I'm trying to beat Cone of Flame but beating nothing else, or not even Cone of Flame maybe. So the right play against an opponent where you don't know about Cone of Flame is probably to hope that they don't have it. And if they have it, then it might still be better to accept the possibility of losing to Cone of Flame than trying to play around it. Now that is a very negative way to end this opening discussion, but of course, if you have the chance, go for it. If you can maybe not drop your creatures in a way that they just get picked off by a one-sided Wrath Cone of Flame, please do so. But don't despair if it's not possible to play around Cone of Flame. It might be better for you not to. Mass Calcify, on the other hand, is a card that you can actually play around. Now, I generally want to know that my opponent has an effect like this, and I don't really expect it to come out of the white aggressive decks in the format, so I'm not really too concerned about playing around Mass Calcify in a game 1 situation, and of course this completely changes once I've seen my opponent play it. Also, if your opponent doesn't cast any creatures or only 1 creature and then stops playing spells, that's a big warning sign for a card like Mass Calcify. Alright, that's it for today. My opening discussion of notable cards in M15 Limited. Just a few examples, but already a lot to talk about and a lot to take in. I hope this helps you drafting M15, but also just becoming a better limited player in some way or the other. I've prepared a draft as always, and also as always, I love your feedback. Hit me up on Twitter, post in these comments here. I also read the YouTube comments, but if you want me to answer, it's best to go to mtgoacademy.com and leave your feedback there. As always, thanks for watching and enjoy the show, and see you next time. Bye bye.
If you'd like to purchase Magic Online cards with event tickets while logged in on Magic Online, look at Mtgo Academy's selection by trading our official bot, Academy Sellbot. You can find it in the Magic Online trading area or add it to your buddy list.
Alright everyone, our draft has just started. Pick one, pack one of this M15 draft. Offers up a Stormtide Leviathan, which is definitely a nice way to start a draft. You already know that you're going to be blue and you're going to want to be casting 8 drops, so divinations and control cards are a lot more valuable all of a sudden. Alternatively, there's Stoke the Flames, just a very, very efficient instant. Well, I think it's on par with the Stormtide Leviathan. I think the commons aren't overwhelming in this pack. Oreska Swiftclaw, Sungway's Pegasus Welcanturn. None of these are really the commons that I'm looking for in M15. And also, to be honest, I don't want to primarily draft commons if possible. I'm going to go with Stoke the Flames here, because I think overall cheap cards and Convoke cards are where you want to be, rather than 8 drops in this format if you have the choice. So a rare is missing from this pack, and triplicate spirits are being passed. With Stoke the Flames, Borderland Marauder and Inferno Fist get a bit more value as a second pick, but I'm not going to pass triplicate spirits if somebody is passing them to me. The fact that the rare is missing means that it might be a white card, but looking at Constricting Sliver, Devouring Light and triplicate spirits in the pack, I think that it's more likely that it's a non-white card and that somebody is trying to set us into white, which I'm happy to move into. Alright, it's possible that I'm picking Raise the Alarm here as a great way to work with my Convoke cards. Forge Devil is also fine, but I think Raise the Alarm is just almost the same as Forge Devil, but generates a bit more value in general. Also because it does tap for 2 if you want to Convoke. So looking at the alternatives, most of these cards are pretty bad. I don't think that Life's Legacy is great. If we had the Leviathan, Wall of Frost would be a nice addition. Meteorite is fine, but clearly not the card for these kind of 2 cards that we started with. It's really between Raise the Alarm and Forge Devil, and I like Raise the Alarm a bit better. Alright, it might just be Sungway's Pegasus to follow it up here. There is a Pillar of Light, also an Act on Impulse. Not a big fan of these cards, but I like Sungway's Pegasus. It's never been bad in my experience, so I think that's a pretty easy follow-up. It seems that white is open, and I'm just going to try to move in on that. And now, well, there are more white cards, but Wall of Essence is usually not where you want to be in this kind of aggressive white deck. It does block on the ground, so it's not awful. And then there's Heliod's Pilgrim. Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of Heliod's Pilgrim. If you have a Spectral Ward, clearly that's great, but otherwise you're usually playing like cards that aren't amazing to make it work, to make it good. I like Research Assistant and Carrion Crow better. It's just that I'm basically abandoning my red card and I don't know what I'm getting in return. And given that I'm not sure which colors I'm going to be, I think that the Pilgrim is still the pick. Just not happy about it. Another Pilgrim. It's pretty much the same pack here. Carrion Crow, Heliod's Pilgrim. There's an M15 Path Mage, which I don't think is good. I'm not interested in a double red card in this at this point. And to be honest, the second Pilgrim makes me a bit more happy about the first one, because that means we might be able to draft a deck around them. And this is a pretty easy Selfless Cathar. Void Snare is fine, and Aggressive Mining is fun, but Selfless Cathar works really well with everything we have so far. And that's a very late Into the Void. 8th pick Into the Void is a very rare occurrence. I like it better than the white cards and everything else, so I'm just gonna slam that. Another Pegasus is also a great sign if we just want to draft white cards. Maybe splash Into the Void, we'll see about that. So all of these cards I'm not looking to play, so I can just pick the Radiant Fountain. I don't want to play it, but if I end up in mono white, which there is a non-zero chance of, then I'll just run this as a value land. And I think the most playable cards are Statue of Denial and Unmake the Graves. I'm not gonna run the Statue though. I'm gonna take the Chrono Stutter. If I end up in a heavy white deck, which I think will be the case, then I'll want splashable cards over anything else. And Encrust against Ornithopter. I'm not gonna run Encrust, and it's not particularly good against me, but it's an aura for Heliod's Pilgrim, so not that I'm looking forward to play Ornithopter anyway, so that's fine. Hydro Surge I can probably hide. And yeah, that's what it's looking like right now. The core of a cheap aggressive white deck, the Sunrays Pegasi are really good with the 2 Pilgrims, because now any kind of auras will go on a life-linking evasive creature, which should be quite potent. Interesting. Soul of Innistrad is not what I was looking for. Could have opened up a white, blue, or red one. That would have been fine. But here I'm actually not sure if I should take it. So my options are to take a white card to stay on course, take the Welkin turn as the evasive blue option, or, well, the red cards aren't really on par, or take Soul of Innistrad itself, just so that I don't have to play against it, and that, well, I could potentially splash it. I'm just not sure if a black 6-drop is where I want to be with this deck, and to be honest, I'm quite sure that I don't want to be there, given that my deck is cheap white creatures and a triplicate spirits at this point. I really don't want to play this this kind of card, this kind of 6-drop. So that makes me want to pick the Swift Claw here, which I think is only a little bit better than Welkin Turn, and that's because I'm not 100% sure where I'm going to end up. Oh, interesting, a Brood Keeper. So now I could pick the Welkin Turn that I didn't pick last pack, but I also have the option of picking the Brood Keeper, going for the white-red build, and then I have 2 Heliod's Pilgrims to make the Brood Keeper work over time. I think I should go for that. Also enabling the Stoke the Flames, hopefully, and giving my deck a nice red-white direction. So from now on, clearly any kind of auras are going to be the highest priority. I also passed the Stormtide Leviathan, so I think what we're seeing here is a lack of blue cards for that reason. Also a Hornet Nest. I don't care too much about the Hornet Nest. I'm gonna take Rummaging Goblin here, card I always like to play. There is an Ajani's Pridemate. That might be a great addition to the double Sunrays Pegasus deck. It also works pretty nicely with Heliod's Pilgrim and Divine Favor. I think it's better than Generator Servant by a lot, and the first Pridemate is better than the third Sunrays Pegasus, which is also not particularly close. And here it's Willforge Golem or Pillar of Light. I actually well, there's also Ephemeral Shields. I actually think that Willforge Golem isn't all that amazing. Sometimes, well, ground creatures are just not that great in my experience. So I would like to pick Ephemeral Shields or Pillar of Light here. Given that my deck is lacking removal spells, I'm gonna go with the Pillar. And another Pridemate. I think I'm just going for that. Then I have double Pridemate, double Sunrays Pegasus, meaning that any Soulmenders will be welcome additions. And that looks pretty strong to me. Selfless Cathar is now worse than the Soulmender, but still a fine card. Yeah, also there isn't really anything else here. And there is Marked by Honor. Now I could pick Oppressive Race for the Heliod's Pilgrim, but having one Marked by Honor is pretty much exactly where I want to be. And here I'm just going to take the white card and Hate Draft Endless Obedience. Alright, Staff of the Sun Magus is actually fun with 2 Pride Maids. I could see that working out, although I have the Radiant Fountain already. Tireless Missionaries would be the more playable version of Life Gain, which might actually be better. I would love to play Staff of the Sun Magus, I just don't think it's entirely reasonable to do so. With the Radiant Fountain and the 2 Sunrays Pegasus, I should actually be in a pretty good position. So this pick is really just what do I don't want to face, and also which card do I could I potentially play myself. And yeah, I don't care much for either of them. If I'm such an aggressive deck, Dissipate shouldn't be amazing against me. So let's get rid of the, well, let's just leave this into the void here. Depending on what the next pack brings, I could still decide not to play the red, because I really only have Rummaging Goblin and a Broodkeeper. But I also have Into the Void, Divination, and in theory, Encrust or Chronostutter. Oh boy, the Sliver Hive Lord in the last pack. I'm not gonna go 5 color, sorry about that. I would love to, but this is just not the deck for it. What I'm gonna take here is Inferno Fist, because I have the 2 Heliod's Pilgrims that want cards to search for, and it's always nice to be able to search for a removal spell that also works really well with Sunrays Pegasus. I also don't need another Swiftclaw, I have more than enough 2-drops to cast. So yeah, this Inferno Fist was actually a great pickup. And here, it might just be Hoarding Dragon. Now, Hoarding Dragon gets a bit better if you can find an artifact, which I might still be able to pick up. It's just so much better than Blast Firebolt, and I have more than enough 2-drops. Also, I don't think that Oppressive Race is very playable. You can board it in sometimes in my experience, so even with the 2 Pilgrims, I'm not thrilled to pick it up. Hoarding Dragon is, at its worst, it's going to be a nice air elemental, which is already great. Here, Soulmender is the easy pick with 2 Pride Maids. It's gonna make for some pretty busted starts, hopefully. And 12 cards, 3 packs deep. I get the choice between Seraph of the Masses and Sanctified Charge, which is pretty insane given how late in the draft it is. Now, both of these are going to be great in my deck, and sadly I'll have to pass up on Divine Favor here. Both aren't great if I don't have any creatures, clearly. And my token generation is actually not through the roof or anything. So I think that the Seraph is the better card for me. It fits quite nicely into what I'm trying to do with this deck. Not an easy pick, but I think Seraph of the Masses is just good enough to do that. Now, let's see where we are. If I cut these and this Lava Axe, also the Tireless Missionary, I think that I have a good curve. I also managed to pick up 2 nice spells to deal with anything that my opponents might throw at me. And I have a bit of life gain with 2 Ajani's Pride Maids. So all of this is really, really nice. What I could do is pick up a second Soul Mender to really make the Pride Maids better, and they will also allow me to convoke up my spells. That seems better than picking up a Midnight Guard. I don't really want to be on the defense, so yeah, let's take that. And there's another staff just mocking me. I really would like to play the Staff of Sun Magus Ajani's Pride Mate deck, but I have a feeling that it wouldn't be a reasonable course of action, especially now that I have 2 Soul Menders. I should be very fine. So yeah, I'm gonna hate to have Fester Gloom from this pack, which is kind of a card that I'm scared to play against. There is a Tyrant's Machine, which I could fetch with Hoarding Dragon. I'm not even sure if I would want to main deck it. Alright, could pick up a Bronze Sable here, which it gives me just a little bit of value with the Hoarding Dragon if I decide to play it. And I might just because of the Hoarding Dragon. Thundering Giant is also fine. It is another double red card though. My mana isn't great and I really want to play this Radiant Fountain with the 2 Pridemates, so I would much rather not pick up any double red cards. I'm gonna take the Bronze Sable here. And this doesn't look amazing to me. Could pick up a Lava Axe, then I have 2 in my sideboard to bring in certain matchups. I'm not gonna play Tireless Missionaries. And I don't think that I should hate draft anything. Alright, I think that now the good cards are pretty much done for. Black Cat will be good against me with all the X ones. But I'm taking the M15 Path Mage so that people don't have that against me. Call Barrier and Negate are also not bad. I'm going to take Oppressive Raise for the sideboard. It's great with the 2 Pilgrims if your opponent plays a good utility creature. And that should be pretty much it. Another Encrust, alright. And the instant life gain spell. Even with 2 Pridemates, I'm not going that deep. Great, let's see if that works out. So my deck is almost done, almost ready to be submitted. So this is already 17 creatures, not counting Raise the Alarm and Triplicate Spirit. So my overall creature count is 19, and I have these 5 non-creatures, which put me at 1 card too many. I have Tireless Missionaries in my sideboard, Oppressive Raise in my sideboard, and the 2 Lava Axes. Now, the last 3 of these cards are definitely playable, but not amazing. Now, playing 1 Lava Axe doesn't make a lot of sense. I think you would have to be forced to play both of them. And Oppressive Raise could have its uses as a tempo card, but later on, if I draw it, I still have the Broodkeeper to draw towards. So, and with the 2 Heliod's Pilgrims, I will have a 3rd aura to fetch. So I think Oppressive Raise is definitely a card that I could run. Bronze Sable could make the main deck because it blocks Intimidate creatures, and I have the little synergy with Hoarding Dragon. Now, I'm not sure which cards I would want to cut from this deck. I already need to cut 1 card, and I think it's going to be Crowd's Favor. But if I wanted to add Oppressive Raise or Lava Axe, I would also have to cut down on my creatures. Now, in my experience, having these cheap run drops is crucial to make the red-white Convoke deck work. Now, with Triplicate Spirit, Seraph of the Masses, and a Stoke the Flames, every creature that I have early on is just going to be valuable. So I really don't want to lose any of these. Also because the 2 Soulmenders are going to be incredible with the Ajani's Pridemate. So the easiest cut, I think, is Kinspale Skirmisher as my weakest 2-drop, given that everything else is better. And my next cut would be Bronze Sable, which loses, then I lose the ability to block Intimidate creatures, and I lose the extra value from Hoarding Dragon. What I gain is a bit more power, because I really never want to draw the Bronze Sable on its own. It's, well, except against Intimidate creatures. So, in that sense, Kinspale Skirmisher is just more powerful than Bronze Sable, especially on offense. Now, Crowd's Favor I'm not a fan of, and I already talked about why Oppressive Raise might be better. So, if I put this here, I could just get rid of the Crowd's Favor, but also, looking at this, 6 spells, or 6 non-creatures, if I count the Triplicate Spirits and Raise the Alarms as creatures, would still leave me with 17 creatures, and I think that might just be enough, so that I would much rather have the Crowd's Favor to maybe keep the Pridemates alive than to have this random Bronze Sable, which is just most likely not to do anything. So even though I'm losing the ability to fetch it with Hoarding Dragon, well, which would only be relevant in like half of the games anyway, I think that this is the better build, giving me just a little bit more play when it comes to combat. Can't be a bad thing. So I'm hopeful that this creature base is still sufficiently good, and I think that I can live without these 2/2 drops. So the mana isn't awesome here. Let's see. Combine this, sort by color. I would really just want 7 mountains, and that's already quite a lot. I have the Hoarding Dragon, sure, but I have the Stoke the Flames, which also gets cast by 2 of my red creatures, so 7 is generous, which would in general give me 10 planes for these cards, which is kind of where I want to be. But because I have the Radiant Fountain, I'll have to cut down on one of these. And either way, it's not going to be perfect, but I think with the 2 Pridemates, I just have to play the Fountain. It feels like the advantage is just too high not to run it. So my options are, let's see if Magic Online agrees. Well, Magic Online is always a very conservative on the splashed lands. My options are basically 10-6 or 9-7 with multiple white sources. Definitely not being irrelevant, but if I curve out with at least 1 planes, then I'll not need double white very early on. And the same could be said for red. My red is needed quite late, and I also don't have too many red cards. Overall, I think that a 10-6 split is better, because when in doubt, I'd much rather wait for Stoke the Flames or Hoarding Dragon to be castable than to wait for a lot of my white spells to come online. I really need a plains in every single opening hand, but I can live without having drawn a red source for a while. That said, this is my deck. I'll sort this again, and I think it looks good. Let's see if I can win some matches.
If you'd like to exchange your Magic Online cards for event tickets while logged in on Magic Online, you can do so by trading Mtgo Academy's official bot, Academy Buy Bot. You can find it in the Magic Online trading area or add it to your buddy list.
Welcome to round 1. I won the die roll, so we'll be playing first. And not a super exciting hand, but I'm not gonna mulligan. I have a solid curve. I have one part of my combo and perfect mana. Well, no double white, but as we've seen, double white isn't all that important. The Oppressive Rays don't look amazing already, but with the Heliod's Pilgrim, there's a lot of cards that I can draw that I would love to put an aura on. And here, when in doubt, I'm always going to deal the damage with the Soul Mender. Later on, I can go into life gain mode. Clearly, if my opponent just plays a land and passes, I won't be attacking with Soul Mender because the risk of Raise the Alarm is too high. Broodkeeper, perfect card here. And I will just get Marked by Honor. I think it's the most powerful card on its own. And no attacks. If my opponent doesn't play Raise the Alarm here, then I can be quite sure that he doesn't have it. Should that be relevant? Netcaster Spider might be a good target for Oppressive Rays. I'm not looking forward to putting this on Broodkeeper if I can avoid it. Especially because I want to make the Broodkeeper turn the Broodkeeper into a 4/5 with the help of Marked by Honor. Playing against green-white, this might actually work out beautifully. Could also be possible that I'm gonna see a Hunter week here. Alright, Rogue's Gloves. This is awesome for me. Doesn't affect the board. My opponent's creature won't be damaging me if my opponent spends all his mana to equip here. And I even have Oppressive Race to punish any kind of equipment shenanigans. Yeah, this is just perfect. And Johnny's Pridemate is also really good. So, like I said, I'm gonna put Marked by Honor on Broodkeeper, so that I have really no interest in putting Oppressive Race on it as well. Maybe later if it's stopped somehow. Or next turn I will put the Oppressive Race on a creature that my opponent holds back to block. What this does mean is that I will not putting the Ajani's Pridemate into play just yet. So here I'm also safe from Gather Courage. Yeah, this is pretty amazing. No plays by my opponent. So this could mean that Broodkeeper is getting himself into trouble if I just cast it. There might be a Devouring Light, for example, to get rid of the Keeper. So the question is if I want to allow my opponent to play that, but the thing is I can't be sure that that's what my opponent is planning to do. I think I can still pretty safely attack here. I need to pump once here to ensure the trade. Yeah, this looks like a Gather Courage. Which is kind of interesting, because this doesn't really save the Netcaster Spider if I pump two more times. I'll just see what happens. Now, what I didn't do was to... Did I play land? I don't think I played a land. No, I probably should have played the land, given that I would have still been able to Pillar of Light. I think that was an oversight. But my opponent's play also didn't make a lot of sense there. So now I have an Ajani's Pridemate, which is going to grow as well. And that's it. Alright, this was surprisingly easy. And looking at my sideboard, I think I'm fine with the setup that I have here. Okay, looks my opponent is also quick with the sideboarding. And once again, not a superb hand, but I'm not gonna be too picky. This is why I really like Rummaging Goblin. This hand needed a little bit to get going, and the Goblin is going to provide just that. So I have two lines of play here, and one of them involves casting Inferno Fist on Selfless Cathar, but if I do that, I really want to attack as well. Now, this is horrible if my opponent has raised the alarm. And if not, it's actually a great play. So I think with this particular hand, I just accept the fact that I'm making a very weak play against Raise the Alarm. And there it is. That was really, really bad for me. And clearly I was aware of the danger, but the upside is just too high, I think. My opponent didn't show raise the alarm last game, otherwise I wouldn't have made this attack. And against the Sunblade Elf on the draw, I wanted to gain back some of that momentum that my opponent had gotten from his powerful 1-drop. Alright, Marked by Honor doesn't seem amazing. The problem is if I lose the Ramaging Goblin to combat, I won't be casting Triplicate Spirits anytime soon. Okay, this is probably targeting the Swiftclaw if I were to guess. Yeah. So now the Goblin doesn't even have a good block. And I have an interesting decision here. Because the Swiftclaw dies to a single spirit, it might be still better to Stoke the Flames the Sunblade Elf in order to just cast Triplicate Spirits and have blockers for everything my opponent does. If I Stoke the Flames the Swiftclaw, I'm weakening my own Triplicate Spirits, which I don't think I can afford to do. So I'm gonna do this and not Convoke. I'm also not going to discard this Plains because I want to Convoke the Triplicate Spirits. It would be nice to draw a 1-drop here, a white 1-drop. And now I have to hope that my opponent doesn't have any more plays on 2 mana. I've been quite fortunate that my opponent was stuck on lands for a little while. Okay, there's the 3-drop. And a Netcaster Spider as well. So I get to cast a Seraph of the Masses, which isn't bad. And then we'll have to see what happens. Clearly I can't attack or anything. What I can do in the future, hopefully, is to cast Marked by Honor on Seraph of the Masses to make it almost impossible for my opponent to attack without suffering major losses. Okay, looks like some aggression is going on. So Gather Courage is still a card. Why is Netcaster Spider not attacking as well? I think that would be the better attack by my opponent. I really just want to block the Swiftclaw with a Spirit and not block the Skirmisher at all. I think I can on 5 life. I think I can afford to be a bit conservative still. Is this just going to be the indestructibility spell? No, it's the Gather Courage. Oh, that's why the spider isn't attacking. Okay. Don't know if that was actually in my opponent's interest. Okay. Well, at least that would give me a bit of time. This isn't great. Radiant Fountain. Well, I guess I just play it because I need the Rummaging Goblin on defense, and the life gain is actually not bad. If I tap the Rummaging Goblin this turn, I only have 2 blockers against my opponent's 4 attackers. That's not an option. So I just play this, and I actually play the Fountain. It is 2 life after all. Good thing I played the Radiant Fountain. Can now pay the mana for the Oppressive Rays. Which is just a nice coincidence. And I'm not sure what my opponent's plan is going to be here. In a sense, he wants to just keep on the aggression. But if he doesn't have a combat trick, I don't think he can attack necessarily. On the other hand, he also has this guy. So potentially could go into a late game. So yeah, my draws are really nice here. I get to play Broodkeeper, and I get to hold up mana for the Seraph to block with. Now my opponent's board is getting bigger and bigger, but I don't think my blocks are sufficient. No, I need to have the mana for the Seraph on defense. So that's actually a pretty good Oppressive Race on my opponent's side. Okay, that didn't even find anything. It's good for me. It would be good if I could get the Seraph up to 7 power. And then threaten lethal in 2 swings rather than 3. Don't really know why I have a stop there. Oh, I do. I wanted to kill Goblin Rebel Masters before. Crowd's Favor. I think we're just holding that. It seems like the kind of card that you'd want to have on defense. And if my opponent doesn't do anything that forces me to cast it, I can still decide to trade it in for something else with the Rummaging Goblin. Oh, another Swiftclaw. It's not great for me. At least my opponent is kind of playing this less aggressively now. Thanks to Yisan the Wanderer. Okay, another Oppressive Raise. That's really bad for me. So this is on there twice, so I expect that I'll have to pay 6, which I won't be able to do. I think on Magic Online I can just try to block and then it'll tell me if it doesn't work. Yeah, I don't have 6 mana, so this guy isn't blocking. Which probably means that I'm pretty dead. Let's see, I can block the Yisan at least. And cast the Crowd's Favor. That's not going to be a winning play. But getting rid of Yisan is better than not. Going down to 1. I'm going down to 1 anyway, so I don't think I've much of a choice. Could have. Well, I'm not beating the late game of Yisan anyway, so I think that's a fine block. Okay, my opponent has something else, so I'll just concede, not show any more cards here. Yeah, the turn to raise the alarm effectively made it impossible for me to win. I was aware that I was running into that, but I would do it again. I think that was a reasonable line to take. So overall, I think the matchup is fine. I'll play around the raise the alarm from now on. I also like that I have the raise the alarm myself, which is great against what my opponent is doing. This Yisan guy is a bit of an issue. Not much I can do about it, except for racing in the air. So that's what I'm gonna try to do. I also have Oppressive Race already in the main deck, which is just pretty sweet. Alright, this is a nice hand. Definitely keeping, and my plan here is to run out the Pegasus before the Pride Mate, and then, especially with the help of Selfless Cathar, the Pride Mate is going to grow on turn 3. This Hoarding Dragon isn't a great card in my hand, but if I should be so unfortunate to draw too many lands, there's a reasonable shot that they'll be mountains, although my first draw sip is of course a plains. So I'm not going to do my opponent the favor again to run into Raise the Alarm. Although, to be fair, oh boy, that's really unfortunate, because Sungrace Pegasus plus Ajani's Pride Mate would have been a really nice combo here. Now I only have 6 mana for the Seraph. That was a really good plummet by my opponent. Okay, the aggressive oppressive race again. It's understandable that my opponent just wants to great draw here in Soulmender. My opponent just wants to delay the game, really, because he has the Bard. It's not even a Bard, is it? It's a human rogue. Yeah, getting Sunblade Elf. Nice start. From now on, plains or mountains aren't bad because I'll have mana for the Pride Mate. And I'm putting on a reasonable amount of pressure on my opponent, so don't think that things are necessarily lost here. Probably shouldn't F6 so aggressively. I think my opponent forgot to search with his Yi-San. At least I didn't see it happen. That must be great for me. So I will always yield to this, and I will... Well, I wanted to always use it, but I think I missed this. Oh well. There isn't much to say about this gameplay. I just have this Seraph of the Masses, and I'm hoping that it's getting me to victory. Oh, I'm also growing Ajani's Pride Mate so that at some point I'll have another threat. But given that my opponent has so many ground creatures and can fetch more, it's just unlikely that the Pride Mate will pull out the game. Oh, he is a Bard after all. Yi-San the Wanderer Bard. Alright, got it. Opponent's just casting random creatures, really. Not attacking with the Swift Claws into my guys, threatening the activation of Sunblade Elf. Might have been a mistake as well. So I should have chosen always use this, yes, and then only after that I had the choice to do something else, but oh well. Yes, and what am I getting here? Well, I'm clearly not getting Inferno Fist. I can't cast it. So Marked by Honor is alright, but it isn't great. Oppressive Race, on the other hand, just to shut down the Wanderer a bit, sounds really awesome. Now, I could also cast this on Netcaster Spider, but that really only costs my opponent one turn because he's already forced to chump block with the Spider this turn. I think I'm casting this on the Wanderer also to see if my opponent responds or not. That way I will know if I can attack with the Sangre's Pegasus, or if there is another Spider coming. Okay, so that's going to be maybe an oppressive raise of my opponent. It is. So the card that I could lose to here is a second oppressive raise. But that sounds really unlikely. Yeah, I don't think that's a problem. I mean, I have 5 lands already. If my opponent double oppressive raise my Seraph, then I'm just hopefully drawing a land and winning. Also, let's see if my opponent can make his Netcaster Spider indestructible. It looks like that's what's happening. But still, we dealt 1 point of damage here, gain 1 life, and grow the Pride Maid. Yes. So from now on, I'll probably be forced to pay 3 to attack with a Seraph. I almost want to make use of my Selfless Cathars to, for example, attack for 2 instead of 1 next turn. Don't quite know if that's going to be viable. Okay, my opponent is running everything out there, so Yisan is not getting activated. Alright, an uncastable card. Was to be expected at some point. Yeah, so I'm not gonna sacrifice a Selfless Cathar because there's a good chance that I'll need it on defense. I also need to kind of play around Sanctified Charge if my opponent just attacks with everything here. But clearly I'm just winning next turn if my opponent casts the charge, so I don't have to block in a way that makes me beat his board in any way. I just need to survive. So that's what I'm going to try to do. The way I see it, if my opponent activates his Sunblade Elf, I should be winning. I don't really see an issue with that. Now the Seraph might not be lethal anymore, but I have this, for example, which is also lethal. So this will block here as well. I think my opponent had to make this attack a lot earlier, given how the game played out. But of course I don't know what he's holding. It's also possible that damage is just allowed to resolve, but I think that I'm in a dominant position then. It looks like my opponent is trying to cast some kind of Convoke spell, maybe? Not so sure what this highlighting means because my creatures are also highlighted. Yeah, I'll pause this and let you know how it ended. Oh no, there we go. There's the Sanctified Charge, alright. So, yeah, that means my block is pretty terrible, of course. But it also means that it shouldn't really matter. I'm on 22. My Pride Mate is 9/9. Opponent doesn't have the mana to cast anything. And I drew a land, so let's see what happens. No blocks and enough damage to win the match. See you next round.
Love playing Standard on Magic Online? Check out Academy's Standard Bot in the Magic Online Classifieds for Standard Singles.
Time for round 2 on the play again, which is nice, and a pretty nice hand as well. Actually kind of interesting which 2-drop to start with. I don't really want to trade them off, given that I have Triplicate Spirits in hand. And turn 2 Sungrace Pegasus is also a lot better if my opponent has a ground creature, but also if I manage to draw into one of my Pride Mates. So I'm tending towards the Sungrace Pegasus, in fact. I think that might be the better line. The Swiftclaw is also great on defense if my opponent at some point plays a 3/2 or a 3/3. Yep, so far so good. I'll just go with the Pegasus here. It is a 2-point life swing after all, and I think it's just more likely to get through next turn. Yeah, I mean, trading against this Torch Fiend wasn't anything that I was looking forward to. So I think that I want to get the Rummaging Goblin active as soon as possible. Every turn that I get to untap with it, I'm gonna get rid of cards I don't really want. And Torch Fiend is a blank against me. Don't need to aggressively deal with that. Okay, Borderland Marauder is good. Pillar of Light is not amazing. I think I want to play the Swiftclaw and delay the Spirits for next turn, because Swiftclaw trades nicely with the Marauders, and that gives me more turns to attack with. To attack with the Pegasus, which is good. And I even drew a pretty nice card here. Crowd's Favor. I'm not too keen on casting it, but depending on what my opponent does, it might give me a nice trade. Yeah, I'm not gonna give my opponent the chance to 2-for-1 me by casting this removal spell. Kokesh. Okay, I think that this ability is probably irrelevant. It's just a 4/3, I think. And I drew Heliod's Pilgrim. So Heliod's Pilgrim will sooner or later find me something to put onto the Sungrace Pegasus, and it might even be the... what's it called? The Inferno Fist. As that works really well with Sungrace Pegasus, and then I still have the mana to kill anything I want, or at least shoot 2 damage to anything I want, which sounds better than getting marked by honor first. If my opponent attacks here, I'm just trading Torch Fiend for a Spirit, and I'm taking 4 from this guy. Kulkesh Onake Ancient. I would love to Pillar of Light it, that guy, but doesn't have enough toughness. Oh, my opponent is also on the Ravaging Goblins. Tyrant's Machine is a bit unfortunate for my Heliod's Pilgrim plan, but overall, I'm not. It's not too bad to see this card here. My hand is a bit all over the place, so what I could do would be to get Oppressive Raise, because my opponent will not have a lot of mana in this game. I kind of like the Radiant Fountain, but it is the one card that I would be discarding to Rummaging Goblin here. I think I need to hold my tricks and just play the Pilgrim. That way I get to keep open Crowd's favor. I just wait on the... Well, I think I'm going to discard the Fountain, but I'm going to wait on the decision. That way I have the Rummaging Goblin to do whatever I want to do with it. Now what's kind of bad is to get Inferno Fist and then my opponent knows about it. But it's still the most powerful option I have, I think. What I could do would be to Inferno Fist the Sunrise Pegasus right now. Now that's another one of these risky lines, because then a single removal spell just 2-for-1s me. The problem is if I show my opponent Inferno Fist, then I'm getting 2-for-1 if my opponent wants it. If my opponent has an instant removal spell, he's just getting rid of the Pegasus. So yeah, I think it is another one of these examples of going for the risky line, because my opponent has all the information anyway. This is a game where we both have active Rummaging Goblin, so it wouldn't be the end of the world to lose the Pegasus here. And I'm getting basically an immediate 4-point life swing by casting the Inferno Fist as well. Looks like my opponent has more than enough lands. Oh, I guess this is part of the plan. Now I get it. I didn't realize that was actually a combo. So Kurkesh and Tyrant's Machine are quite nice together. I was aware that my Sunrise Pegasus would get tapped down. I just wasn't aware that something else was suffering as well. This is something huge. 3/3/3 beasts. Well, this Pillar of Light is not good. I think I'm going to discard it now. I'm not sure why my opponent is going for this line. It looks to be a bit defensive to me, given how much pressure I'm putting on. But now I feel like I have to do something before the Tyrant's Machine becomes too active. Alright, that didn't work out at all. The plan of drawing something relevant. This is 6 damage. Could deal 7 with the Crowd's favor. But 7... I can always deal that extra point of damage with the Crowd's favor. Because, well, if there's a point where all my spirits are not dealing any more damage, then I don't think I'm winning. not finding anything with the goblin makes a big difference. I was expecting to just have anything that would have prevented my opponent from being able to take an aggressive line here. And now that's exactly what's happening. My opponent is able to do just that. Well, by not taking an aggressive line, I meant not being able to attack with this, for example. That would have made a big difference. Looks like my opponent is actually playing quite conservatively here. I think that's interesting to say the least, but it might also be a bit dangerous for my opponent. Now I certainly have a couple of draws to get me out of this. Another land. So I expect the Tyrant's Machine to tap down the Pegasus and his Spirit. And I really just want to block. Well, I really just want to deal the last 2 damage here, because then I'm going to be threatening lethal. But my opponent has 13, 14 points here, which means that I just die if I don't have a blocker, which is very unfortunate. I'm gonna try to find something that's better than all these lands I've been drawing. Sungrace Pegasus, that's something. Okay, my opponent gets to change the target of this. Tap a Spirit, alright. And now I have my opponent on 6, 5, 4, 3, 1. But I don't have him dead. So because of that, my opponent could threaten to tap down 2 of my creatures again and then kill me with his ground creatures, and I can't even Infernal Fist to protect me, and that forces me to hold back both spirits or to bluff something, but I don't think that I'm winning this game by bluffing, so I can't attack with anything here. But at least I get a Sungrace Pegasus, which is another flyer. So one thing that my opponent can do here is to tap down both of my spirits to force the Sungrace Pegasus to block. But doing so means that I have more attackers in my next attack step. So my opponent is, should be going for a 2-turn. I think my opponent should still attack with the 3 beasts and the Kurkesh. This is interesting. It depends if my opponent thinks that I still have something, and if he thinks that he can beat it, which isn't quite clear. I can block the Kurkesh with a Spirit token and then use the Inferno Fist to kill it, and that way my opponent won't have the double tap. But the tap right now is only preventing 1 point of damage anyway, well, the second tap. So it's not clear if that actually accomplishes anything. If my opponent taps here during his turn, then I think I'm winning. Because tapping 2 creatures, I chump block with 1, leaves me with lethal damage, and my opponent knows that, so that's not going to happen. Looks like my opponent is rummaging, discarding Siege Worm. Yeah, that card is too expensive to matter here. That gives me the interesting out of just my opponent not having a blocker for Rummaging Goblin. or not being able to use Tyrant's Machine. Both are great for me. Very interesting development here. Is this an aggressive use of Tyrant's Machine because my opponent didn't find anything? It's quite clear that this loses my opponent the game, so if he doesn't have anything else, that is. Yeah, that's it. Double tap. So this targets a Pegasus. This will target a Spirit, I guess. I'm still dying to like a Forge Devil here. Okay, my opponent only taps one creature, so has a blocker to play. And I would be taking 13, so I'm forced to block with one of my creatures. And I have to try to win next turn, clearly, so... Which is also why I'm keeping the Inferno Fist to win the game rather than do anything else. Okay, another land. Well, my draws haven't been great. But I will get the chance to attack here. And I'm attacking with everything. Now it's up to my opponent to find something against this. Lightning Strike is not enough. I get to Inferno Fist, your face. And then you kill the Pegasus. I also stayed on 4 lives, so I basically survived this on 1 life. Mostly because I decided to Inferno Fist the Sunrays Pegasus when I had the chance. This was super close and very interesting. So this is the kind of deck where I want Lava Axes. The kind of deck that plays like this tap artifact and I don't know, like Feral Invocation or what it's called. That's just the kind of deck where you, as the aggressor, want to be lava axing people out instead of spending time doing other stuff. So I think evasive creatures are great, but I'm already not sure if the Brood Keeper is what I want to be doing. Brood Keeper is the kind of card that's just takes a long time to get going, and I don't think I have that kind of time. Also, it's a card which my opponent can Lightning Strike in response. I think that Brood Keeper is an easy cut. And Pillar of Light was pretty much doing nothing the whole game. Now, if my opponent ramps into a quick Siege Worm, I would be happy to have it. The question is how bad my matchup is really. If my matchup is really bad, I might be forced to take that out just to have more Lava Axe, more reach. Boarding in 1 Lava Axe makes me really want to have the second and also the Stoke the Flames, but I could see getting rid of the crowd's favor just so that I keep a high creature count and the amount of red cards I board in, or the amount of red cards in my deck stays constant. I think this is how I would build it, and looking at this Kinsale Skirmisher, that doesn't seem better than a Restless Swiftclaw to me. So I'm gonna keep the Pillar of Light, not go overboard with this. Although I could see playing this differently, but I kind of like the cards that I have here. So yeah, let's try it like this. I guess it would have been a Kinsale Skirmisher instead. And overall, my deck should have a good curve, but doesn't have a lot of removal. So I think the exile thing should be fine. I'm on the draw, but this hand is garbage. And this hand is a lot better. It's pretty much dependent on the Seraph only. But at least I get to cast him on turn 4, hopefully. Alright, bit of pressure there. Not what I wanted to see. So now I could actually play this defensively and try to block it with Raise the Alarm. And I think I have to, because the Pilgrims aren't going to do any blocking and the Seraph is not guaranteed to come down, which means I will have to play a longer game with the Heliod's Pilgrim. Also, I'm not really scared of a Lightning Strike here. If that gets hit by a Lightning Strike, I'm a lot safer to put the +2/+2 aura on Heliod's Pilgrim, for example. And I think that's what I should be getting. The Marked by Honor is the card that I need to have in my hand if I draw land, and the Oppressive Raise I can still get with the second Pilgrim. I might actually take the trade here if my opponent offers it, because I don't want him to ramp out anything huge. Wow, Goblin Rebel Master. I should draw a mountain pretty soon. Nope, not a mountain. Now my removal spells don't do anything against this Rebel Master. So I just play another Pilgrim, I think. There we go. Yeah, these Lava Axes don't look amazing against the draw my opponent is showing me. Suddenly an aggressive deck. At least I have some nice blockers, and I don't think that the Rebel Master can attack this turn. If it would have, I would have double blocked. Okay, there's the mountain. So I think my best line is to put the Marked by Honor on the Pilgrim, hope that it survives. I almost want my opponent to play something huge, because that will allow me to Pillar of Light it. And then I think we should be fine. Also, 4 toughness is great against Lightning Strike. I have the Selfless Cathar next turn. Maybe I'm forced to cast Inferno Fist without a second red open, but I would prefer if that wasn't the case, of course. Important thing about this guy is that your opponent can always get mana from it, and can also use it on non-creature spells. So I'm blocking here. I mean, my opponent has the Lightning Strike now. That's kind of unfortunate, but his line of play isn't giving me any information in that regard. Triplicate Spirit. So we're getting somewhere, but not in the range of castable cards. The problem is also that now a double block by my opponent is not what I want to see. So I think I just have to pass the turn here without attacking. But so far, nothing is happening. So if my opponent wants to somehow be very aggressive with convoking out a Siege Worm, maybe, I have just the right cards. Also, my opponent's deck suddenly is only X1s, which is horrible against the Triplicate Spirits that I'm going to cast. It looks almost like my opponent boarded into another deck somehow. And that can't be bad. So I like Inferno Fist, but Triplicate Spirits is too powerful not to just run it out here now. This just looks utterly amazing against my opponent's board. I'll have the spirits, I'll be able to cast Seraph of the Masses with a huge discount next turn. And I still have a bunch of great cards otherwise. So this is not a Siege Worm. This might be the 3/3/3s my opponent is convoking. No, it is actually a siege worm. I think my opponent could have just tapped all his creatures. So this has trample. It doesn't show up on the card anymore, but it does mean that I'm not going to block it. Taking 5 here is more than fine. And I even drew a land, so I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to play everything I want here. Just gonna make sure not to miss anything. I'm also almost threatening lethal with the combination of Selfless Cathar and the Spirits. So I kind of want to keep open 3 mana to also cast Pillar of Light, which I'm probably going to tap out for. So I just need to cast this with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we Pillar of Light this guy before anything can happen. And now if my opponent doesn't have anything, I'm attacking for lethal next turn. I think. Well, depending on if this gets blocked and what I do with the Infernal Fist and so on. But in theory, my board is lethal. Okay. Opponent agrees. We win the match.
Curious about the price of a Magic Online card? Try our searchable price guide on the right sidebar of any mtgoacademy.com page.
It's round 3 time, and I'm looking at Soulmender into Ajani's Pridemate. My deck looks to have given me the best possible draw. We are playing against Gimli Axe, who mulligans to 6. I'm keeping though. Let's see if my opponent can stop my combo here. Now, interestingly enough, Soulmender isn't even a card you would necessarily kill with a Crippling Blight if you have it, because Crippling Blight can deal with cards that are a lot more troublesome. So this is already interesting. I have the Ajani's Pridemate, which kind of runs into Ulcerate if I play it here. I could also just play Soulmender and Selfless Cathar, but that runs into the Festering Creep or whatever it's called. I think I just go for the Pridemate and hope that it lives. My hand isn't bad otherwise, so. Always yes, always yield. Now it's up to my opponent to stop this guy. Verdant Haven, alright. Taking it slow. I like it. So clearly the danger of losing all my creatures to a -1/-1 effect is still there. But I don't think that my hand is really suited to play around that, so I'm just going all in really. I do have a 4/4 to make up for it. And I wouldn't be surprised if my opponent just ramps into something huge here. Okay, Flesh to Dust, so my best creature is definitely gone. Well, I do have to draft the Verdant Haven deck at some point. Does seem rather awesome. Oh, see what my opponent got. Soul of Innistrad. So the ability doesn't matter, but it's a 6/6 Death Touch that I have to deal with. Okay, my draws are pretty nice here. And the one thing I'm wondering is if I'm going to hold the Selfless Cathar in my hand so that I just don't show it to my opponent at this stage, and then hopefully just kill my opponent with the activated ability. I could also play it, and then if my opponent really taps out to kill it, I think I'm winning. If my opponent has the -1/-1 to everything, I'm pretty much losing no matter what. So I'm not sure. I think I can just run it out. Run it out there and see if my opponent has anything. Okay, it's just a guy. Oh boy. So my opponent needs to pay 3 mana to block with this. Then my opponent has 2 blockers and I have so many attackers, and I activate Selfless Cathar that I just win. So I think that should be it. Attack with all. Now if my opponent has the prevent all damage, then I would be in trouble a little bit. But yeah, this is a great start to the finals, and I think that this is another Lava Axe matchup. So not a big fan of the auras here, but I probably need them. Can't really see boarding them out in this kind of matchup. I can do without Crowd's Favor, and I think I can do without Broodkeeper again. It does seem amazing to get the value out of it, but if the ground creature of Broodkeeper is not super relevant and you want to get evasive as soon as possible, it's just not really what you want to be doing. You want to take things to the air and or do absurd things, for example, with these guys, or just swarm the opponent, and Broodkeeper is neither of these things. So let's hope that I managed to draw a mountain this time, though. Didn't really work out last time. Now, Radiant Fountain is a card that you could also cut with this boarding plan, given that the life I gain isn't going to be remotely as relevant in this kind of one-sided matchup. But I mean, Ajanis Primate still gets counters from it, so I'm just because I can draw like Primate Fountain without a Soulmender, I think it's worth its slot. I want this to be like the most aggressive build I can play. Well, that's not super aggressive, but I think I'm keeping anyway. Now, in Constructed, you would probably mulligan this because your hand isn't entirely doing what you want to do in the matchup. On the other hand, I have a pretty good shot at drawing a 1 or 2 drop here before things get serious. There's the Raise the Alarm. And otherwise the hand is just full of good cards with solid mana, so I find it difficult to mulligan a hand like this. Now if I'm super lucky, the Elvish Mystic would have attacked here, but I wasn't, so let's Raise the Alarm. Alright, we are almost close to casting some of these Convoke spells. And I don't mind the Zoth Shade at all. If my opponent wants to pump mana into it to deal damage to me, he's very welcome to. I don't care in the slightest. It would be good for me, in fact, if I was taking 4 here, because this is a lot more difficult to beat. So I'll be forced to Stoke the Flames that. Even a mountain? That's insane, because no, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, I thought I could Triplicate Spirits plus Stoke the Flames, but I don't think I can. No, I'm a bit short. So what I can do is cast Helios Pilgrim with it, which is a lot worse, but still I'm gonna get rid of the Nightfire Giant immediately. In theory, I could get the what's it called, oppressive raise, but I'm really not sure. Well, I could get the oppressive raise to get rid of Nightfire Giant, but I'm not sure what my opponent is holding. So I'm still getting the oppressive raise, but I'm casting the Stoke the Flames here because I don't want my opponent to just be able to pay 3 mana for Nightfire Giant and beat me with that. Could also get Inferno Fist, but I'm scared of not being able to use my mana to the fullest extent. Okay, Raise the Alarm was once again great here. And now I'm hoping that there isn't a Soul of Innistrad coming down. taking some damage here. Opponent not pumping as expected. And another Zoff Shade. Well, that's great news for me because multiple Zoff Shades are really not great. So I'm still quite far off casting Triplicate Spirits and the Seraph. So I kind of have to decide which creature to play first. I think I have a potential attack here with the Selfless Cathar. But looking at this, I probably just cast the Seraph and I'm happy about it. Yeah, no reason to get cute, I think. I'm going to tap the Rummaging Goblin. All my cards in my hand are pretty nice to have. And even if my opponent plays something that forces me to react, I would still have time to do that. So this attack looks like a Necrobite to me. It's the only card that really punishes me for blocking here. So I'm going to take the damage, knowing that I'm going to Triplicate Spirits next turn, which gives me a lot of blockers. And also, I need the Seraph in play to win the game. Otherwise, I'm probably not winning, so... This is pretty much free, although I could have held it back because of Lava Axe, I guess. But it also pumps the Seraph, so... Let's see... 1, 2, 3, 4... I don't think I want to Oppressive Raise anything yet. Could Oppressive Raise one of the Zoff Shades. Yeah, let's do that again. Let's cast this for red, Cathar, Soldier. Now I have a 10-10. And that's going to attack my opponent. And I will, in fact, target the Zoff Shade with that. There's the Fester Gloom, really? And I didn't even hold up Selfless Cathar. Opponent could have played it the whole time, basically, but didn't. So I will only be keeping very little around. Elvish Mystic dies, I get to keep this around, but only as a very small creature. And then I have a 2/2 Seraph. I think that Lava Axe is not sufficient to win this. Oh, this is tough. This is really tough. Yeah, I probably should have played more carefully. Just not care about what my opponent was up to, and instead I should have held open Selfless Cathar mana. That was not played very well. Okay, fine, taking 4 here. Drawing another creature is very lucky. I definitely can't complain about my draws here. I've been very fortunate. So, yeah, this is the attack that I want to make. I was expecting my opponent to pay the mana for Zoff Shade. But I think then I just block with the Sungrace Pegasus and I'm still alive. And if only one Zoff Shade attacks, I'm also winning, so... Even the Lava Axe, the uncastable Lava Axe. So, not sure what my opponent has prepared for me here. It could be a removal spell on the Seraph. In that case, I want to be attacking with both the Pegasus. If it's creatures don't deal damage this turn, then I don't want to attack with the Pegasus as well. So this is kind of a toughie, because I'm also winning if I draw a land and I survive the turn. So if this is just a removal spell for the Seraph, I definitely want to attack with both Pegasi. Opponent has 6 mana. Yeah, I'm risking death here, but going up to 5 is very valuable as well. I hope it's just a removal spell. Yeah, that's what I was hoping. Because now I still have lethal and my opponent can't kill me without another card. Yeah, if I win this, it wasn't deserving. I played carelessly and ran into the Fester Gloom. Where Selfless Cathar is pretty much the best protection against that. So yeah, that was wasn't the greatest Magic in the final game, but overall great deck and great performance. So not much to say about this. Let's see if we can take a better look at the cards. I was just very fortunate to know that I'm playing white more or less. And then I dipped into blue and red going... Well, I picked up the Stoke the Flames first, but then I got the white signal in Triplicate Spirits. And that's all I want. If somebody is passing me a Triplicate Spirits, then I'm going to move into white. And knowing that, I was open for white-blue, I was open for white-red. Ultimately, the red cards were a bit more powerful. Broodkeeper, Stoke the Flames, Hoarding Dragon, then the Into the Void that I picked up. Also, blue wasn't really open to the left because of the Stormtide Leviathan. And as we kind of saw in these games, I was just very happy to be playing the cheap, aggressive, low curve deck rather than going for something like Soul of Innistrad or Siege Worms or whatnot. Lava Axis didn't get to shine, and the last game was a little bit of a lesson against Fester Gloom not to overextend unnecessarily. But otherwise, I'm of course happy about the result, but I'm also happy about how this all went down. As always, I'm Simon Godson, and I'm recording Simon Says for mtgoacademy.com. See you next time.